Hi friends, Mr. Edwards here underneath my tree, and I wanted to talk a little bit about our book we read, Our Tree Named Steve. I thought maybe I could ask some questions to see if you figured out any of the important things in the book, like the characters, the setting, or if you remember the sequence, the beginning, middle, and end. Now, I know Miss Ford always tells us that good readers are always looking for these things. So real quick, let me explain one more time. Characters are the people or the animals in the story. The setting of the story is where they were, where the story takes place. And the sequence is what happens in the beginning, the middle, and the end of the story. So as we talk about the book, I'm going to write down our answers on these very fancy boards of mine. So first, why don't we take a look inside the book and see if we can figure out who the characters were. And I'll give a little pause time, and maybe you could tell someone in the room or draw a picture of who the characters were in the book. This was the book Our Tree Named Steve. Let's see. Ooh, the front cover gives us a clue. Do you see any characters that were in the story? I see a very important character. Our tree. Our tree was a very important character. And then there was a family. There were some kids in the story, and here's a good picture at the beginning. At the beginning is where you usually meet the characters. We have our tree named Steve, and we have the pet dog. There's the 3 kids, and there's mom and dad. So I'm going to add them to this lovely board. And let's see. Oh, I'm going to have to do it like this. So our characters, we had a big tree. And we also had a family. There was the little girl. There was a bigger girl. There was a brother. And there was a mom. Pretty beautiful art, huh? And there was a dad. Oh, and they also had a pet dog. Pet dog wasn't really important in the story, but they did talk about him, and we saw him in some pictures. So those were our characters in the story. There's the family with their dog, and Steve the tree. This is our main character. This is what the whole story was about. Steve the tree. All right, next we're gonna find out the setting. Where did the story take place? Usually the cover gives us an idea. We can look at the cover. We can look through the book. Let's see, where were they? Were they underwater in the story? Were they on the moon in the story? They were mostly in the same place. There's some pictures in the story. Where do you think they were in the story? Did anyone say they were by a house? Remember, the pictures were the picture of Steve, their tree, and their house that they made. And it looks like their house, does it look like they live in a city? Let's see. Does that look like a city? No, I see lots of other trees. I don't see any sidewalks or other people. So I think they might live in the woods. So the setting was in the woods, or not in a city at least. All right, we had a problem in the story. Remember, Dad was writing this letter to the kids, Remember, Dad started the story by saying, "Dear kids," and he's telling them all about their wonderful tree that they loved the whole time. And then here's our problem. Oops, I missed it, sorry. Oops, there's a problem. What was the big problem that happened? The whole story we heard about Steve and all the nice things he did for the family, and then the storm came and knocked Steve over. So our problem is Steve is now a stump. He fell over in the storm. We could even draw some wind. Tipped the tree right over. Now, usually if there's a problem in a story, there is a solution, which is how the problem gets fixed. How did they fix the problem in this story? It was on the last page. Steve got knocked over. Uh-oh. Their dog was sad. They missed the tree. At the very end, the dad said, "But it's okay. Steve is still with us." And they showed a picture of what they did with Steve. Do you remember what the solution was? What did they turn Steve into? What is this called? A tree house. They used the wood from Steve to make a house inside of another tree. So the solution was to build a tree house out of Steve. There's the ladder. There's the tree house up in the trees, some branches. Branches. Kind of looks like a robot, but it's supposed to be a tree house. Can you tell? Yeah, tree house. All right, so the problem was Steve fell over. They fixed the problem by making a tree house out of Steve. All right, last thing good readers do. They remember the sequence of the story. This is an easy way to tell someone, hey, what was that story about? So in the beginning of, I'm erasing this. In the beginning of our story, our character met the family. I'm just going to draw the car here because they pulled up in the car. The family met Steve, their new favorite tree, and they said, "Don't cut it down, we want to keep it." And then in the middle of the story, we learned about all the things that Steve did to show his love for the family. Remember, they used Steve for a swing. They used him to dry the laundry when the dryer broke. They used their uncle went in a hammock on Steve. So Steve, in the middle of the story, was doing all these nice things for the family, showing love for the family. And in the end, after Steve fell down, they turned him into remember what it was called? Tree house. They turned Steve into a tree house. Let me draw this robot type thing again. There's the branches and all the leaves. At the end, there was a tree house. Steve was a tree house. So if your mom or dad or brother or sister ask you, hey, what was that story about? You could say, well, there was a family that wanted a new house, and there was a big tree there, and they named it Steve. And they loved Steve, and Steve did a lot of nice things for them. But then Steve fell over, but instead of taking the wood away, they made the wood into a tree house for them. So, there's your review of our book. Woo! Way to go, good readers. Mr. Edwards, out.